While Jamaica's gaze has been fixed on Kingston and Montego Bay for decades, something extraordinary is happening in the parishes nobody's talking about. Billions in investment. Thousands of new homes. A brand new export port. And the infrastructure to match it all. Two overlooked parishes are being quietly reshaped. And within the next decade, one of them could rival Kingston itself. This is the story of Jamaica's next metropolis, and it's unfolding right now. For 50 years, Jamaica has had a problem: all its eggs in one basket. Kingston and the North Coast have hoovered up investment, jobs, and people. The result? Congestion. Housing shortages. Infrastructure strain. A city bursting at its seams. But what if that wasn't inevitable? What if the next wave of Jamaican growth happened somewhere else entirely? Enter Clarendon and St. Thomas, two parishes that have been sleeping while the rest of Jamaica built empires. Clarendon, once the sugar heartland, now waking up as an industrial powerhouse. St. Thomas, forgotten for decades, now positioning itself as Jamaica's gateway to the Caribbean's hottest emerging market, Guyana. These aren't bedroom communities. This is calculated urban strategy. And the money is already flowing. In Clarendon, the National Housing Trust and Gore Developments just broke ground on something massive: Longville Park, a $25 billion Jamaican dollars project. Over 2,000 homes. But that's just the beginning. The NHT pipeline for Clarendon reads like a developer's dream: Hummingbird Meadows Phase 2, Carlsberg Estate, Longville 3B. Hundreds of units, year after year. This isn't random. This is planned saturation. What we're seeing is unprecedented. 5 years ago, if you asked about housing in Clarendon, people laughed. Now, they're struggling to keep up with demand. St. Thomas is experiencing something different, but equally transformative. The government has publicly declared it on the frontier of new development. Large tracts of undeveloped land. Prime geography just east of Kingston. And crucially, infrastructure. New water mains. Repaired roads through the Spark program. Sewage systems in strategic zones. It's the unsexy stuff that makes cities possible. But here's where it gets interesting. Housing attracts people. But people need jobs. And that's where the second piece of the puzzle falls into place. You can't build a thriving city on houses alone. You need employment. You need economic anchors. And Jamaica's strategic planners have figured this out. In St. Thomas, the most audacious project is the new Morant Bay Urban Center, 436,000 square feet of what used to be a Goodyear factory, now reimagined as a mixed-use commercial hub. Retail. Office. Public services. All designed to turn a sleepy coastal town into a genuine urban center. Morant Bay used to be a place people passed through. Now it's a destination. And when you create a destination, you create opportunity. But the real game changer? Port infrastructure. The Port Authority of Jamaica is actively exploring a new export port in St. Thomas. Not for tourism, for business, for shipping materials to Guyana, where construction is booming and demand is insatiable. Imagine containerized goods from across Jamaica, consolidated in St. Thomas, shipped directly to Caribbean markets. That's jobs. That's logistics companies setting up operations. That's supply chains taking root. Meanwhile, Clarendon is carving its own path. The Parnassus Agro Park, over 700 acres of former sugar plantation land, being converted into irrigated farmland for small farmers and agribusiness investors. This is agricultural modernization. This is food security. This is jobs for rural entrepreneurs. Land that was abandoned is now being reclaimed. Farmers who left are coming back. There's energy there again. So, the pattern emerges: housing brings people. Industrial zones and ports bring employment. But there's one more ingredient, and it's invisible until it's not. Most people don't think about zoning. It's boring. It's bureaucratic. It's the stuff that happens in office buildings while everyone else is building things. But zoning is everything. Zoning determines whether a city grows like a well-designed organism or a cancerous sprawl. In Clarendon, the National Environment and Planning Agency (NEPA) has launched something critical, a land use mapping exercise. They're updating the town and country planning development order for the parish. They've trained survey technicians in cutting-edge GIS technology. They're collecting real-time data on land availability, infrastructure capacity, zoning requirements. This isn't sexy, but it's foundational. Without proper planning frameworks, development becomes chaotic. You get informal settlements, overlapping infrastructure, environmental damage. With a clear plan, growth becomes an asset instead of a burden. St. Thomas is moving in parallel. Highway upgrades, Spark Road repair programs, urban center zoning. The infrastructure is being placed like chess pieces, anticipating where growth will happen and preparing for it. Here's the critical insight. These parishes aren't simply growing, they're being deliberately shaped. There's a vision, there's a plan. And crucially, there's alignment between government policy, private investment, and community readiness. So, if all the pieces continue falling into place, what does 2035 look like? For Clarendon, imagine a thriving regional city, 150,000 people, mixed income neighborhoods, modern housing, office parks, light manufacturing. The agro sector is mechanized and efficient. Young people aren't leaving for Kingston anymore, they're staying for jobs. Small businesses are opening because there's a customer base. May Pen transforms from a quiet town into a genuine urban center. For St. Thomas, the transformation is different but equally profound. Morant Bay is a bustling commercial hub. The new port is operational, handling regional trade. Housing developments have pushed the population to 120,000 plus. The unemployment rate has plummeted because there's actual economic activity. Young people see opportunity. Investors see ROI. Most importantly, people are no longer fleeing to Kingston. Kingston remains the capital, the political center. But Clarendon and St. Thomas become genuine alternatives. Economic engines in their own right. Right now, if you want a decent job in Jamaica, you move to Kingston. But what if you didn't have to? What if there was opportunity where you already lived? This is trajectory tracking. These parishes are already moving in this direction. The question isn't whether growth happens, the question is whether it's managed well enough to be sustainable. But let's inject some realism into this story. City building is not automatic. It's fragile, and there are genuine threats to this vision. First, infrastructure sustainability. Building roads, sewage systems, water distribution, that's expensive. But maintenance is more expensive. If Jamaica's government faces fiscal pressure in the next few years, if funding dries up, progress stalls. And stalled infrastructure means stalled cities. We've seen this before in the Caribbean. Projects that look great on opening day become neglected within 5 years because there's no maintenance budget. Second, land titles and informal settlement. If the legal framework for land ownership isn't clear, if people settle informally without proper documentation, you end up with an unplanned sprawl that's nightmare to service and impossible to tax. People are worried, rightfully worried, that while fancy new housing goes up for people with money, where are the affordable options? Where are the poor? Do they get pushed out? Third, economic dependency. If St. Thomas's port success depends on Guyana's construction boom, what happens if that boom ends? What if regional demand shifts? Cities need economic diversity. They need resilience. And fourth, the human element. Job creation looks good on paper. But it means nothing if transportation links don't connect residents to employment. If wage levels don't support living costs. If social services lag behind population growth. City building that's not inclusive isn't sustainable. It just creates resentment. I've seen government projects before. They build something big, take pictures, cut ribbons. Then nothing. Potholes. No buses. No jobs for regular people. I'll believe it when I see it. That skepticism is warranted. These are real risks, not fears, not myths. Real, structural challenges that could derail this entire trajectory. So, here's the bottom line. Clarendon and St. Thomas are positioned at a critical inflection point. The investments are real, the planning is in place, the infrastructure is underway. But the next 18 months will determine whether this becomes a success story or another Caribbean development fantasy that fizzles. Watch these metrics. Housing starts. Port project progress. Infrastructure maintenance spending. Job creation numbers. Population growth patterns. These will tell you whether the vision is real or just another political promise. Jamaica has talked about decentralized growth for decades. This is the first time I've actually seen the pieces align. But execution is everything. Will they follow through? That's the unknown. Jamaica stands at a crossroads. It can continue concentrating growth in Kingston and the North Coast, deepening urban strain and creating a two-speed island. Or it can seize this moment, double down on Clarendon and St. Thomas, and build genuinely competitive alternative urban centers. The infrastructure is there. The investment is flowing. The planning is happening. The only question is, will Jamaica stay the course? If you want to track this story as it unfolds, subscribe. Because over the next 5 years, one of these parishes will either become Jamaica's next metropolis, or it'll be a cautionary tale about what could have been. What do you think? Which parish gets your bet? And what would it take for you to move away from Kingston? Leave those thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Stay informed. Stay invested in Jamaica's future.